the 1960s and The Outsiders. Susan Eloise Hinton was a 15-year-old student when a classmate was jumped by a rival gang on his way home from the movies. This inspired her to write a story that highlighted the socioeconomic divisions in her high school. She was also tired that no one was writing literature that addressed these kinds of real-life challenges young people faced. Her book, The Outsiders, was published in 1967 when she was a mere 18 years old. And through it, she is credited with creating the realistic YA fiction genre. From her website, according to Ponyboy, there are two kinds of people in the world, greasers and socias. A socia, short for social, has money, can get away with just about anything, and has an attitude longer than a limousine. A greaser, on the other hand, always lives on the outside and needs to watch his back. Ponyboy is a greaser, and he's always been proud of it, even willing to rumble against a gang of socias for the sake of his fellow greasers, until one terrible night when his friend Johnny kills a socia. The murder gets under Ponyboy's skin, causing his world to crumble and teaching him that pain feels the same whether a socia or a greaser. The Outsiders is told through the eyes of 14-year-old Ponyboy Curtis, an orphan being raised by his older brothers Derry and Soda Pop. Although he's growing up on the wrong side of town in greaser territory, he is not entirely like everyone else, in that he is a good student and a thoughtful, reflective soul. The book highlights the differences between the haves and the have-nots. Key themes in the story include the effects of communities divided along socioeconomic divides, finding one's individual and collective identity, the loss of innocence, self-sacrifice and honor, and finding empathy. Greasers were a subculture that grew up in the U.S. in the 1950s and 60s. Many were teens and young adults from lower and working class homes. They were best identified by their unique style, particularly hair that was greased back using pomade or petroleum jelly. Guys typically wore workman's pants or cuffed jeans, along with white t-shirts, leather or denim jackets, and work boots, cowboy boots, or Chuck Taylors. The socials, also called the socias, were boys from the right side of town. They grew up in upper-class families and had money to spend on things most teens only could dream of. As a result, they drove the toughest cars and wore fancy clothes. At first glance, they would have appeared as respectable young men to passers-by. However, money also brought with them a sense of entitlement to do whatever they want, as well as the ability to get out of trouble easily. Socia guys typically wore khaki pants, sweaters, and madras shirts, plaid collared shirts, while girls would likely wear dresses or skirts and blouses with cardigans. Hinton was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and while The Outsiders doesn't specify which town it is set in, we do know that she looked to what she knew for inspiration. In fact, the 1983 film adaptation of the book, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, was filmed in the city. Located in the Midwest, Tulsa is known for horseback riding and rodeos, and in the book it is said that one of the characters, Dally, rode the rodeo circuit. Another character, Soda Pop, also loved horses and had a close relationship with one called Mickey Mouse. At the time, the city was also segregated along socioeconomic and racial lines. The 60s were a time of great social change and the development of several counterculture subgroups. Much of the U.S. was racially segregated, and people like Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X were leading the charge of the civil rights movement. Women were also seeking greater recognition and equal rights, especially in the workplace. Leaders of this movement included women like Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The U.S. was also seeing growing opposition to its involvement in the Vietnam War, leading to many anti-war protests. Many young people were inspired by what they saw in the movies. Actors like James Dean and Paul Newman, who often portrayed rebels, were inspirational to the greaser subculture. Popular films from '67, when The Outsiders was published, would have included Cool Hand Luke, The Graduate, The Dirty Dozen, and The Jungle Book. Drive-ins were a popular way for young people to get together and watch films. They would pack as many friends into a car as they could and then watch the film in the open air. People without a car could also attend and sit and watch. Just like what was happening in society at large, music was undergoing massive changes as rock and roll began to evolve. Popular music from the time included artists like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys, Pink Floyd, Simon and Garfunkel, Aretha Franklin, the Supremes, James Brown, Stevie Wonder, and Wilson Pickett. Each of these artists brought a very different style and feel to their music, each representing different subcultures that were emerging during the time. Cars play an important role in The Outsiders. The Socias all drive expensive, tough cars like the Chevy Corvair and the Ford Mustang. These expensive cars represent their superiority over the greasers. On the other hand, while Soda Pop and Steve work at a gas station and Steve is considered a whiz with cars, most of the greasers do not own cars. As a result, they have to walk everywhere.